So good afternoon and good morning to everybody. My name is Jim McDonald with Torrey Hills Capital, and I will be your operator for today. At this time, I'd like to welcome everyone to a more detailed discussion of NGEx Minerals July 4th, 2023 press release entitled NGEx Minerals drills 90 meters at 4.05% copper equivalent and 21 meters at 8.09% copper equivalent, confirming major discovery at the Lunahuasi project. Joining me today from NGEx Minerals are Wojtak Wodzicki, the company's president and CEO, as well as Bob Carmichael, the company's vice president of exploration. Before turning the call over to Wojtak and Bob, just want to take a moment to review logistics. All lines right now have been placed on mute to eliminate background noise. Following today's formal remarks, there will be an opportunity for Q&A. The best way to ask a question is to use the navigation pane at the bottom of the screen, click on the Q&A button, type in your question, and we will answer those in the order that they are received. With that said, I am pleased to introduce today's presenters, Wojtak Wodzicki and Bob Carmichael of NGEx Minerals.
Thanks a lot, Jim. Thanks for the introduction, and welcome everybody to what we think is a super exciting announcement of the remaining results from what we're now calling the Lunahuasi project. So this was previously known as Potro Cliffs. You'll see why we decided to honor it with this new name. I think the results that we put out yesterday are outstanding and definitely the best initial drill holes that I've been involved with in my career. And I think that speaks to the potential that we see at the Lunahuasi project. I think despite one of the key points that we want to make today is that despite the grades and the success that we've had in this early part of the program, we're really only touching the tip of the iceberg here. We've tested a very small portion of a very large overall system. So before I move on into the body of the presentation, I just want to give you all a sense for the scale of what we're dealing with here and how small a portion of it we've tested to date, despite how impressive these results are. So the distance across this image at the top of the ridge that you see in the background, that's about 5 kilometers. If you have very sharp eyes at about the middle of the screen towards the bottom, you can see a drill road, a horizontal line just above the blue line. And then if you have very sharp eyes, you can see the mast of a drill rig. And that's the drill that drilled the discovery hole into Lunahuasi, drill hole 2. So it just kind of gives you a sense for the immensity of the landscape here. The Filo del Sol project, which lies along the same trend that controls both Lunahuasi and the Los Helados deposit. Filo is just about 6 kilometers behind us, and then the Los Helados project is about 12 kilometers towards the right-hand side. So we're right in the heart of the Vicuña district, and this is the first brand new discovery in a while, and we're at the very, very early stages of exploring what is proving up to be a super exciting system. So we'll come back to this image because I think it illustrates a lot of the key points, and I think it'll get across to you why we're so excited by what we've hit in this initial campaign. So we will be making forward-looking statements today, both Bob and I. We will post this presentation on our website, so I definitely encourage you to read through those forward-looking statements when you have a chance. So this is a photograph that was taken by one of our geologists when we were drilling here. And on the left-hand side, you can see the moon setting over these spectacular mountains. And I think once we saw that, we knew that the name had to have something to do with the moon. And so we Spanish word for moon is Luna. Huasi is a Quechua word for home of or resting place of. And we just thought, with this picture, this was the perfect name for a project like this. I think there's also kind of a cool tie-in with the nearby Filo del Sol project. And Filo del Sol means ridge of the sun. So kind of the sun and the moon, kind of two ends of what's shaping up to be a really impressive district. So for those of you that don't follow the company That closely, just a reminder of where we are. Lunahuasi is right in the middle of the Vicuña district. It's the latest discovery in the Vicuña district that the Lundin Group has been putting together over the last 15 years or so. We're right in between the three existing discoveries, Los Helados, Filo del Sol, and Jose Maria. We're about 120 kilometers to the southeast of the town of Copiapó. The Vicuña district straddles both sides of the Chile-Argentina border. However, the Lunahuasi project is 100% on the Argentine side of the border in San Juan province. So NGEx, holds a key portion of the overall Vicuña district. We're not going to talk a lot about Los Helados today, but that's a much more advanced project that is our, it underpins our valuation and is the key project right now for NGEx, although Lunahuasi is rapidly nipping at its heels. Just to the north of Los Helados, about 15 kilometers to the north and off the image, is the Caserones mine, where Lundin Mining recently acquired a 51% interest. The Jose Maria deposit is about 10 kilometers to the south of Los Helados. Lundin Mining has a 100% interest in that. And the Jose Maria deposit is about 8 kilometers due east of Lunahuasi, which is the main topic that we'll be talking about today. And then the Filo del Sol deposit held by Filo is about 6 kilometers to the southwest of Lunahuasi. So we're right in the heart, the geographical center of this exciting new district. So this is just a more detailed look at where the drill holes that we're going to talk about today were plotted onto that same photograph that we looked at earlier. So we drilled 2 holes up on the plateau in the upper part, and then 6 holes in the valley below. So the discovery hole was drill hole 2, and then we drilled a series of holes around that, initially to try to define the geometry of the high grade hits in drill hole 2, and then starting to step out and to try to extend the mineralization that we hit in that first hole. So it's a total of 8 holes. Drill hole 2 was released in April, and today we're going to talk about the rest of the holes, which are shown in black. I don't know, Bob, is there anything I've missed that you want to add at this point?
No, not so far.
Okay. So just kind of a visual representation. One of the things that is difficult to see in that photograph, as spectacular as it is the horizontal dimension. Everything sort of gets foreshortened. So we talked about the horizontal scale, the 5 kilometers that's the distance across that image. There's about a 750 meter elevation difference between drill hole 1 and 3 and the valley drill holes 2, 4, 6, 7, and 8. But what you don't see on the photograph is that the horizontal dimension. So the horizontal distance between drill hole 2 and drill hole 1 is about 1.5 kilometers. So they're quite far apart in horizontal distance as well as elevation. And this oblique view gives you a better sense for that. So just to summarize the whole season's drilling, we drilled 8 holes. This was an initial program. We started out thinking we would just do 2 initial scout holes. We exceeded, I would say, our expectations with the result of drill hole 2. We expanded the program, and we ended up drilling a total of 8 holes in almost 5,000 meters. Of those, 2 were up on the plateau, and our current interpretation is that those are on the edges of this system. They drilled long intervals of kind of peripheral style of alteration, and that gives us a sense that those holes were drilled probably into the western edge of the system, and the bulk of the system lies between the valley holes and that plateau. So those 6 holes in the valley intersected a quartz sulfide vein swarm, and we'll talk about what we mean by that, with very high copper, gold, and silver values, and true widths up to 20 meters. Included within those overall intervals that you see are some real bonanza grade copper, gold, and silver numbers. So, we're seeing up to 20% copper over 2-meter intervals, up to 44 grams of gold, and over a kilo, over 1,000 grams per ton of silver. And, this is while we're drilling in a portion of the system that really, these systems are typically zoned. There's a copper part of the system, and then there's typically a more precious metal rich part of the system. We think the bulk of our drilling has been into the copper rich part of the system. But despite that, we're seeing indications that there may be really significant gold and silver elsewhere in the system. And that's something that'll be part of future exploration programs. But some of these statistics, I think, speak to the grade potential of this system. So, within our current database of samples, there were 20 samples with more than 10% copper, including 5 over 20%. Some really impressive gold numbers ranging up to almost 44 grams per ton. And then you can see some of the 18s, 11s and 12s. And then also, similar to what we see at Filo, very high silver values also present, with 39 assays over 100 grams per ton and 5 over 500 grams per ton. So, as an initial program, as a start, this is a pretty impressive down payment. The area that we've tested so far is relatively small. The drilling covers and tests a block that's about 400 meters east-west. We drilled 2 sections of holes roughly 180 meters apart, and then we tested things with the deepest hole down to 850 meters below surface. So these are super, super encouraging results for a first pass test. And as that red box on the slide shows, we've really only tested a very small fraction of the system. So I think that speaks to the potential as we start to step out and test the rest of the system. So, really, I think the final point I want to make here is that despite these results and kind of how extraordinary they are, we really feel that we're just at the very, very early stages of exploring the system, and there's lots more to come and lots more value to be created from where we are today. So I'm going to just stop for a second, see if Bob would like to add anything.
I think, why don't you go through the presentation, and then we can have some wrap-up comments at the end, maybe just to
Okay. Yeah. So this is a vertical section, a vertical slice through one of the lines of holes that we did, and it'll give you a sense for what we were trying to do. So, drill hole 2 was the discovery hole. At that point, you just have one pierce point. You don't know whether what you've drilled is flat, inclined. If it's inclined, which way is it inclined? So we drilled a series of holes from that same platform, and then a platform 100 meters to the east, to try to define those geometries. And what we've defined is that in this part of the system, what we're seeing are steeply dipping, almost vertical series of multiple quartz sulfide veins. And there's enough of these that I think it really, and you can see that in the complete table of results in the news release, that this is really a swarm of veins. We are interpreting these veins to be related to a major yet to be discovered porphyry copper gold center. So despite the grades that we're seeing here, we're interpreting this mineralization as being on the edges of the causative porphyry system. And part of our exploration program next season will be to vector in and step in towards the center of the system. So everything that you see here today is really just the edges of the system. And when you see these sorts of grades at the edges, it really makes you think about what might be at the center. So I think another important point, although the overall mineralized system and the overall family of deposits that Lunahuasi falls into is very similar to what we see at Filo or what we see at Los Salados, this part of the system is fundamentally different. What we're doing in this part of the system is high-grade vein exploration. So that's analogous to what you would do on a high-grade vein gold system. That's kind of how you have to think about it. The grades are an order of magnitude higher. These are steeply dipping structures. This is probably in this part of the system, it's a selective underground mining target that we're testing for. So, you're not going to see the 1,000-meter intercepts of 0.5 or 0.6 that you might see at a Los Salados or a Jose Maria or a Filo. What you're looking at is much more concentrated mineralization, and therefore the volumes are different. But in this sort of remote location, we feel that that's exactly what we want. Grade is king, and these are some of the best grades, if not the best grades we've seen anywhere in the district, and we think in this location that's exactly what we want. One of the things I want to point out about vein systems is that one of the characteristics of them is that they are structurally controlled, and they tend to pinch and swell along strike or laterally and up and down dip or vertically. So these things are going to have thinner portions, thicker portions. And that's important because some of the thicker intercepts that you see, chances are as we chase them laterally or up and down dip, they're going to, some of those will pinch down. But by the same token, some of those thinner intercepts that you'll see in the table, I mean, the tons of thinner intercepts that we see, the 2s, the 4s, the 10 meters, by the same token, those are likely to swell somewhere along strike or up and down dip. I think one of the things that has really struck Bob and I is the vertical extent of this mineralization. What you often see in vein systems is a specific vertical interval of maybe a couple of 100 meters where the majority of your grade is, and then things tend to kind of fade out as you go up and down. We're not seeing that at Lunahuasi so far. So, we've tested a vertical extent of almost 850 meters, and the grades are remarkably consistent within that. So we're not sure exactly what that means from a genetic point of view, but it's very encouraging for the strength of the system and potentially the overall potential. That just seeing vertical extents like this is extremely rare. We're still working on what exactly the exploration model here is. I mean, this is definitely porphyry related mineralization. We see veins very similar to this, or similarities to some of the bonanza grade gold silver veins at El Indio in Chile, in the Pascualama Veladero district. And then there's a lot of similarities, especially in the high copper veins, to some of the veins in the world-class Collahuasi and Chuquicamata systems. So, it's possible to see both styles of mineralization in one of these porphyry-related systems, and it's possible that we're seeing both end members, and they're good end members to have present. So I just want to summarize what we think are the key takeaways. These are the highest grades we've encountered over these sorts of widths to date in the Vicuña district, and that's very significant for a first pass drill program. We didn't do a lot of sophisticated targeting for this initial pass of drilling, and I think it speaks to the robustness of the system when your very first few holes drill these sorts of grades. In the other systems that we've worked on in the district, it's taken us a much longer time to vector into the highest grade part of the system. Here, we basically did it on the first try. And, as much as Bob and I would like to put that down to our skill and the skill of our team, there's an element of what nature has given us, and what nature has given us here is it looks like is a really robust system where it's not that hard to drill some really impressive grades. And I think that's really has important implications for future exploration here. I think the other thing that we're really impressed with, and we think is really important, is the sheer number of veins that we've intersected in these drill holes, the consistent high grades that we've intersected, and then the persistence of that high grade to depth. And I think all three of those factors really speak to the robust nature of the system and the robust nature of the causative intrusion or the causative porphyry copper system that drove all of this. And I think in summary, these results really increase our confidence that this mineralization is just a small part of a major porphyry system that has the potential to produce some really exceptional grades once we work our way into it. And then I just want to stress this final point that, despite the success that we've had in these early days, we've really only tested a fraction of the overall system, and there's lots more to come here. So, this image, again, I'd like to come back to it because I think it'll give you a visual idea of some of what's to come here. So the style of mineralization that we've drilled so far is, the mineralization is hosted in kind of these silica sulfide ribs. And if you look across the image, particularly on the right-hand side of the image, you can see these resistant linear, steeply dipping features. And those are the upper expressions of the type of mineralization that we've drilled. And as you look across this image, you can see that there's a whole bunch of those kind of trending across that 5-kilometer trend here. So, we don't know yet whether all of these are equally mineralized, but, these would be very, very similar in nature to the mineralization that we've tested at depth. And then I just want to take your eye back to that, that very small postage stamp in the lower kind of middle part of this image that we've tested. So as we step out and as we start to test some of these other silicified ribs that we see on surface, well, we'll see what we hit, but we're very excited about the potential for more of the sorts of structures that we've already hit with the drilling to date. So in terms of next steps, drilling is finished for the season. All of the results are out with the news release yesterday. We're currently very busy doing targeting and planning that next program, which is going to be significantly larger than the 5,000 meters that we've drilled so far. We're expecting that program to start once we get through the Southern Hemisphere winter, so probably early in Q4, meaning sort of late September, early October. We're still in the midst of planning next season's program, but tentative objectives for that are extension and further definition of that high-grade vein system that we've hit so far. So kind of better definition of what we've hit in that initial block area. Then we definitely want to step out and start testing some of these other silicified structures that we just looked at on the previous image. I mean, this is, we've tested a very small part of an 11 square kilometer target area here. And, we see surface evidence of other silicified structures. So we definitely want to test some of those. And then we want to start vectoring into the center of the system. So, we don't know exactly what the division between those three objectives is going to be, but we're going to want to test all three concepts in next season's program. So, we're super excited about the results so far. I mean, this is pretty amazing. I don't think either Bob or I have seen these sorts of results this early in exploration on any project that we've been involved in. And, we're very excited to see where this takes us next. So that concludes the formal presentation from me. I mean, I'd like Bob to maybe fill in any gaps or any things that he thinks I've missed.
Yeah, thanks, Bud. I just wanted to leave, I guess, three main concepts that this really brings forward to me. And the first is proof of concept. This is a very large 11 square kilometer alteration zone that we see here. And it's geologically plausible that it was created by a big barren or low grade porphyry system. I mean, that does happen in places in the world. And the accordance of these few holes with these high grades in the veins are telling us that this is not one of those systems. So to me, you get a multiplier effect with it. The fact that we've got this much metal in a small area tells us that the porphyry system that created all of this mineralization is significant and creates a lot of metal, and it's a very compelling exploration target. But I think it's really important to keep in mind that Lunahuasi on its own is very, very important. I'm just scanning through the questions here, and there's lots of talk about the porphyry system and how are you going to find it and where is it and how big is it. Even if we don't find an associated porphyry system to this, Lunahuasi is a very significant mineral deposit. And I think one way to look at that, if you just take those holes and average up the grades over the entire length of the hole, you get, 500-600 meters of over 1% copper equivalent. You're into the sorts of widths and grades that we see in the Aurora zone at Philo. So that tells you that it's the same amount of metal in this system. What's unique about it is that that metal is concentrated into specific structures and specific veins. And I think that's a very good thing, because when it comes to a mining perspective, one way to think about it is you've got the same amount of metal. The grade is an order of magnitude higher, which means that metal is in an order of magnitude smaller volume of rock. And you think about that through to a mining operation, your production rate is an order of magnitude less, your infrastructure is less, your capital cost is less, but you potentially get the same amount of metal out of it. So I think it's exactly the target that you want to find, particularly in an area like this, is something that's very high grade. This is would be an underground mining target. It's fundamentally different from the large open pit projects that we see elsewhere in the vicinity, but that's a really good thing. It makes it much easier to do. So even if we are obviously going to spend time looking for the porphyry, I think there's a good indication that this whole system is going to turn into something very significant. But I want to make sure people recognize the significance of Lunahuasi. These veins are those kinds of widths and grades, and Voigt mentioned the vertical extent. Those are on par with some of the peripheral vein systems to some of the bigger porphyry systems in the Andes and also in the South Pacific. There's some really good examples there. And then fundamentally, it is still very early days here, right? This is a handful of holes that were drilled in the first season. We hit on every single one of them. It's telling us that there's a lot more work to do here. We've got a really good crew down there. We've been doing this kind of work for 15 years, and we know how to explore these systems. We know how to work in this environment. And we're all full speed ahead right now in the planning stages to launch a much bigger program up here starting in the South American spring and generate a lot more results throughout the upcoming summer.
Yeah, I think that's a really good summary of some of the really important points. I guess one thing just to give people maybe some comparables. One of our potential exploration models here is the El Indio system, which is about 150 kilometers to the south here, and that was an extremely significant bonanza gold silver producer that operated in the 90s and into the early 2000s, and all of that mineralization for what was a major mining complex fit into a box that was 500 by 400 by 300 meters or something like that. So when you're looking at grades like this, the scale sort of changes, and the volume and the search radius is quite different than the porphyry system. And I'd reiterate what Bob said, like we are going to look for the porphyry center here, and that's going to be super interesting, but none of that should overshadow the importance of grade and the sorts of grades that we're seeing here. I think you'd much rather have 10 times the grade and 1/10 of the volume. That's what it's all about. You're moving less material, you're building smaller facilities to produce the same amount of copper. So that's definitely something to keep in mind.
Just for reference, and as geologists, we always like to use analogs and look at exploration models. And Voigt mentioned the El Indio deposit, which we would use as an exploration model to try to figure out what this might be and how to explore it. And that was a total of 23 million tons, and the grades were 6.6 gold, 50 grams per ton silver, and 4% copper. So, we are definitely seeing those grades in every one of the holes that we've drilled here. And, I guess the point is we don't need 1 billion tons of this material to make a compelling ore body. If we get in the range of 20 to 50 million tons of this, we've got something extremely valuable. And, with the holes that we've drilled so far, certainly arm wave that kind of a size of this.
I don't know if we should maybe, Jim, move on to answering some of the questions.
Yeah, just a reminder for people on today's call, if you do have questions, use the navigation pane, click on the Q&A button. We'll get to your questions. Also, and I think Wojtek, the last time you read through the questions on your own and then answered them. Do you want to do that the same?
I think it might work better if you do it, if you don't mind.
I don't mind. And then also, I know that there was one person that had their hand raised. So if that's, we'll get to that in the order that came in as well, if you're okay communicating directly with somebody if they have a question. Are you okay with that?
Sure.
Okay. Let's go through the questions then. So first one, congratulations on the results and on the choice of the new name. I would like to know what has led you to interpret with so much confidence that the center of the system may be to the west. Is it because of what you see in these holes? Does geochemistry have more weight in this, or the geophysics campaign that was done a few months ago?
Well, I think, yeah, so both Bob and I can answer that. I mean, I guess I don't want to have too much confidence. I mean, there's two choices basically in what we see for where the center of the system might lie. I think, as you look to the west, you see, I mean, you can see it in the image here. You see a lot of strong alteration. You would expect that the intensity of alteration would increase towards the center of the system, and we'd see more of a, kind of a phyllo type, pervasive, texturally destructive kind of overwhelming alteration. And we think we see that as we look, into that 1.5 kilometers to the west of drill hole 2. But another candidate for the center of the system is actually off to the east. So further down the valley, there's a lot of cover, but in the edges of the valley, and you can just kind of see it, a little bit of it in the photograph. I mean, we do see evidence of porphyry style alteration outcropping in the sides of the valley. There's some historical drilling down there, a 1 kilometer or 2 down the valley that hit porphyry style alteration. So I think the jury's still out. It could be off to the east, it could be off to the west. And just to, I guess, preempt some of the other questions I see a little bit further down, I think, we're pretty happy with the land position that we have here. I mean, who knows, a lot more work needs to be done. Who knows whether there will be mineralization on some of the ground that some of our sister companies hold. I don't really want to speculate on that. But we're pretty comfortable with the ground that we hold, and we're pretty comfortable that the ground we hold, has significant potential. Whether or not any of that extends onto some of the ground that sister companies hold, their exploration will show that down the road. But we're comfortable with our land position. We're comfortable with the targets that we see on our ground.
Excellent. Just
I think that covers the next 2 questions.
Okay. So we'll go to what about proximity and risk that the core of the system actually is on Lundin or even phyllo grounds? You already answered that.
Yeah. I who knows, right? Like, once I don't really want to comment on other people's ground. I think, there's exploration programs, I think, being planned by both phyllo and Lundin Mining that will show us. This is a big system. We'll see how far it extends.
Okay, we'll go to the next question then. If it has not already been mentioned in the webinar, roughly how many meters do you think you will aim to drill next drill program? Which is followed up with, I figured the area is so big in scale that it might need an absolutely huge program with a large number of drills. Yeah,
there's a balance there, and Bob can comment as well. But at these early stages, I think one of the things, I mean, you can always do a lot of drilling, you can always spend a lot of money. The trick and the challenge is spending that money intelligently. And I think in the early stages, it's important not to throw too much at it, because you can kind of you can get out past your data. And sure, you can be drilling holes, but you're learning so much from each hole that it's important to kind of have a staged program. And I think a good illustration of that is what we did this year. We had no idea what we were going to hit. So our initial plan was 2 holes. When we succeeded, on those holes, we expanded the program. And I think you'll see that approach from us going forward. So, tentatively, we would see maybe a 3 or 4 drill program. And then, as we gain confidence, as we open up the logistics, as we open up the roads, we would look to expand the program. But you're not going to see us, throw 10 drills at this right away. We need to develop the road network. We need to learn a lot more about the system, and the bigger programs are much more appropriate further down the road when you know more about the system. So I think you'd see it. You can anticipate a significantly larger program than what we did this year, but not like we're not going to go drill 50,000 meters and throw 10 rigs at it. We just don't have the road network or really the knowledge of the system yet to intelligently do that. I don't know, Bob.
No, we're still early stages in the planning, but what I envision next year is the two components. One is a resource drilling program at Lunahuasi. I mean, we definitely are at the stage now where we know we've got a big enough system with enough grade and enough veins that we need to do the drilling to put together a resource there. So that's probably a couple of drills doing fairly close space drilling, and that's multiple holes off the same platform. Logistically, it's pretty straightforward. And then also some further afield drilling back up on top of the plateau and from the cliffs. And that's much more focused, target driven exploration that, we need to work up the surface targets, compile all the geochemistry data and alteration data that we also collected last season. And that's kind of testing point targets and seeing what else we can learn up there. So it's those sort of two components that we'll be working on.
Yeah, and I see a question here. To what extent is finding the porphyry the main objective next year versus, I mean, I think it's a little bit of both. Like I think, as we've said, I mean, we are going to try to find the center of the system. That's important, but they're I think they're all sort of equally important objectives. The high grade vein swarm in and of itself is a really impressive target. We want to make sure that we better define that. I mean, I think we can walk and chew bubblegum, like we can try to vector into the porphyry center, and we can, as Bob said, continue to define that super interesting high grade mineralization that we've already drilled. So, you'll see us initially doing a little bit of both, and then kind of see where the program takes us and see if there's any part of that needs to be expanded.
Next question, and maybe I'll skip one here. With these systems, is it possible to have a relatively barren porphyry feeding it?
I mean, I think that's the proof of concept that Bob alluded to. I think initially, for sure, before we drilled these holes, you can get big alteration systems that don't have a lot of metal in it. But what I think this year's program has proven is that that's not the case here. I would say it's extremely unlike, well, it's basically, we know that it's not a barren porphyry that fed this because it pumped a huge amount of metal into the rock. So I guess, before we drilled these holes, we didn't know that's why we needed these holes. This could have just been, a very large, flashy looking alteration system without a lot of metal. We now know that's not the case. It's a flashy looking alteration system with a huge amount of metal in it. So I think it's extremely unlikely that it's impossible that the porphyry that fed this is barren. It clearly brought a lot of metal into the system.
And as a follow-up to that, can you talk a little bit about some of the legwork you're doing to track down the porphyry, and will geophysics play a large part in that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be, this kind of exploration isn't really rocket science. Like, this is where the really good exposure helps. So, the center of the system is likely to be where we see the most intense alteration. We can see that visually. Some other targeting techniques that we're going to use here is we're thinking about flying a drone mounted hyperspectral survey, which looks at in detail at the alteration minerals. That could help us vector into the center. That's the sort of vectoring that was extremely useful at Philo. There's probably limits to how much geophysics we can do on that steep slope. But we've used the techniques that have worked at Los Helados, that have worked at Philo. to the extent that we can. So that's magnetotellurics. We've done IP surveys. We're going to do, we're potentially going to do drone magnetics. Yeah, we're going to throw everything at this to help us vector into the center of the system and to help us explore the vein system that we've already hit.
So with all the success at Lunahuasi, is there a risk that Los Helados is being put on the back burner, or do you have a plan to move both projects forward? If so, how? Is a spin-off potential for one of the two?
Well, we've still got some more results to come out on Los Helados, but I would say that, no, I don't see much of a chance of Los Helados being put on the back burner. It's I mean, it is one of the challenges. I mean, I guess it's a first world problem to have. We have two really good projects here. We're going to have to figure out how we work them both. But Los Helados is a really interesting, really good project in and of itself. It's a little bit overshadowed by the spectacular results from Lunahuasi, but that's a project that we want to keep moving forward as well. We've had a lot of exploration success there, extending the satellite high grade zones. We see some pretty interesting new targets that have come out of the work that we've done there this year. So, we're going to look for a way to be able to move both projects forward. I mean, we're not currently thinking about a spin out. I think it's, it's still really early days at Lunahuasi. And I think, while the spin outs have been very, very successful for the NGEx group of companies in the past, I think a big reason for that success is that a lot of careful planning went into them. So, spin outs are actually administratively or paperwork wise, they're pretty easy to do, but it's thinking through why you're doing it, making sure that you're going to, that 1 + 1 is going to be more than 1. You need to, and I think we need a little bit more work at Lunahuasi before we, before we're ready to do that. So no current spin out plans, but if these projects develop the way that that we think they're going to, and if we saw an opportunity to create as much value as we have in the past, we definitely consider a spin out in the future.
And given yesterday's results, does an open pit concept make more sense now than it did before?
No, Bob, do you want to take that one?
An open pit concept where? Understand that.
I guess here at Lunahuasi.
No, it doesn't. And I think that's one of the key takeaways from this, is that Lunahuasi is fundamentally different, which I think is very, very positive, right? It's exactly what you want to find in this location is something that's high grade enough and enough veins that it could be mined potentially as an underground operation. It's really much more efficient, much cheaper, much easier. So Lunahuasi is not the kind of deposit what we see so far that you would consider open pit mining.
And from Gabriel, will you be able to place a road and drill rig right above the silicified structure on the cliff face? If not, from where would you be able to target the area underneath the cliff face?
I mean, we'll see. Our guys are very, very good at road building and logistics in this part of the world, and I know Gabriel has been to site, so you've seen some of the roads that we've been able to build. This is really more of a steep slope, and we're pretty confident we're going to be able to get roads pretty far up that slope, and we're going to test as much of it as we can. We're not going to be able to get roads in everywhere, but I think a combination of drilling off the roads that we're able to get up that slope and drilling from the top, we're going to be able to get pretty good coverage. We're comfortable that we're going to be able to,
Yeah, I think it's important to keep in mind the scale, and the photograph there is a good representation of that. So the hole that we drilled, hole number 1 from the top, I guess the vertical distance on that photograph from the skyline down to the bottom of the valley is about 750 meters. So if you look at where hole number 1 is, that was a 900 and something meter hole. I mean, it drilled down the entire vertical distance of the cliffs and then some, as did hole 5, which is drilled from the bottom of the cliffs. It was another 900 meter hole. So you're drilling more than the height of that cliffs down below, which gives you 2 kilometers of relief. So we will look at getting roads up on the cliff face. We've done it before. Yeah, Gabrielle, you were up there driving over the Alexita Pass from Los Salados, which is a pretty interesting piece of road. Again, we've got experience doing this, but we are able to target, that entire cliff face from drilling from the plateau, setting up there and then drilling that far down. Relative to the depth of our drill holes, the relief there is not actually that much.
Yeah, and I think maybe I see the next question here. Do you see these results being encouraging enough to launch year-round drilling later this year? I mean, I guess we'll see. Like drilling year-round is all about whether the extra cost and the extra logistical challenges of drilling through the winter translate into shareholder value. So if we think that there's value and we're going to create value by undertaking the extra cost of drilling through the winter, we will. But that's something that we'll have a better sense for after the next program. There's no real reason that we can't. We're drilling up year-round at Filo. This is a significantly more protected environment. So if we can drill at Filo, we can definitely drill here. It's just a question of value. Sometimes it's not a bad idea to take a bit of a break. Like to be honest, this winter we're pretty glad to have a little bit of breathing room to be able to effectively plan the next program rather than have everything on top of us. But if we think that a winter drill program would continue to add value for us and justify the significantly higher costs, we would definitely do it.
And then can you describe the alteration halo into the wall rock? Does it change much vertically over the 850 meter depth?
The alteration is at sort of two scales here, and the one scale is the background wall rock alteration, which is propylitic. And it's the kind of propylitic alteration you see with some quartz sulfide veins in it that carry chalcopyrite. And the importance of that is that alteration is peripheral to a porphyry system. It's the kind of alteration that you see outboard of the porphyry. And that's what gives us confidence that these veins are not in isolation. They actually are in the peripheral alteration zone to a porphyry system. The specific alteration associated with the veins is advanced argillic alteration, clay alteration, which is typical of these structures. And it's very tightly restricted. You don't get much of an envelope of alteration on either side of the veins.
Yeah, so the alteration from the center of one of these structures outward, Joe, would be silica, kind of buggy silica in the center that's been flooded with sulfides, and that's the high grade portion of the veins grading out to advanced argillic kind of clay alteration. And then once you get outside that vein envelope, you're typically in the style of propylitic alteration that you typically see in the halo of a porphyry system. And as Bob said, that's our evidence that in these drill holes we're in the halo of the system rather than right over the top of it. So these veins and this style of mineralization is not that different in character from some of the high grade mineralization that we see at Filo. The difference is at Filo, these structures are sitting right over the top of the center of the system. So the alteration between veins is much more intense. Here we know that we're lateral because the alteration between the veins is propylitic, which is a distal style of alteration.
And just to finalize on that question, it doesn't change much vertically, nor is there a very strong zonation. At least what we know about the mineralization, we do see some zonation patterns, but that's quite unusual over 850 meters. And I think that speaks to the strength of this system, and I think it's very positive for how big it's ultimately going to be.
And follow-up question from Gabriel. In the news release, there was an allusion to the center of the system potentially lying west of the discovery holes. What indicators do you have that would lead you to think that rather than the potential center being east towards Portones?
Well, I think as I said earlier, we don't know that yet. I mean, the two candidates are for the center of the system are either to the west, where we see some of the most intense alteration visually, or to the east, which is into the area that Gabriel referring to as Portone. So it's one of the two, and we don't know which one of those it is yet. You know, we'll probably test both ideas.
And then follow up from Joe, are these veins or veins and breccias? Are there any core photos available?
Yeah, there are some. I mean, they're both. You know, there are massive sulfide veins, and then there are sort of vein breccias. We have both styles of mineralization, and there's some good pictures of them in our corporate presentation.
And then from Joe Wolf, what is the long range plan for return on investment?
That's a softball pitch. And the long range plan is for a huge return on investment. I'm not sure how else to answer that. I mean, I think if you look back at the history of NGX and the NGX group of companies, I mean, we've had a pretty remarkable return on investment. You know, we started out in the original NGX with and you know, market cap is only one measure of it, but you know, we started out with a market cap of around $40 million. The three NGX daughter companies today, Filo, Jose Maria, now part of Lundin Mining, and NGX, you know, those are worth over $5 billion. So that's been a pretty good return on investment. You know, past returns are not guarantees of future returns, but you know, we definitely set our sights high.
Hopefully that answers your question. Next one, can you talk a little bit about funding going forward?
Well, you know, we're a junior exploration company. We're equity financed. We typically raise enough money to, you know, cover a year's program. So we raised $30 million at $2 last October. You know, our job is to spend that money as effectively as we can. I think this year we've done that in spades, both at Lunahuasi and at Los Salados. But as an equity finance junior company, we will definitely raise money again at some point.
Okay, and then looking to the fault-controlled veins of El Indio as a model, has the team been able to map where any controlling faults to the veins at Lunahuasi may lie?
I mean, I think the short answer to that is yes. I mean, I think, you know, the surface expression of, well, first of all, we're in a 1 kilometer wide structural corridor, which is basically what you see in this image. You know, that's basically the kilometer and a half wide structural corridor that runs all the way from Filo in the south up to Los Salados in the north. So this is a major structural feature. You know, we're right in the middle of that at Lunahuasi. The surface expression of some of the structures within that are those silicified ribs that we talked about earlier, and the structures that we've hit in the drill holes. So yes, I mean, we have been able to map, and I think we've hit some of the controlling faults in the drilling. That's what the mineralized structures that we've hit are.
As follow-up to the press release, can you add a little bit more light on the comment, quote, possibly underline the extensive alteration zone immediately to the west of this season's drilling, unquote, and what specifically led to this as an early target? And will that be the initial target in the spring?
You want to take that one, Bob?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it already.
Yeah.
I mean, just looking at the image here of the alteration, the type of alteration leads us to believe that maybe it's to the west, but we don't know. And the targeting that we mentioned was the geochemistry and geophysics and the hyperspectral survey that we completed this year, the surface work that will help us to refine the targets there.
Yeah, I think we've also answered the spin-out question. You know, we're not currently planning a spin-out. If we think we can create shareholder value through a spin-out, we will consider one in the future. Yeah, any zones of supergene enrichment? No, not so far.
Don't really need them.
And then Gabriel's looking for a little bit more elaboration on hole 4, specifically as to the difference mineralogy. maybe
It's just looking at zonation, I guess, and again with the El Indio reference, that deposit was clearly zoned from pyrite and enargite massive sulfide veins similar to Worsting into quartz gold veins with some truly amazing bonanza grades within them. So, when you get into these systems, typically they are zoned. It can be laterally or vertically. And part of your exploration vectoring is trying to understand what that zonation is. So, again, we're early days. We've only got 6 holes into it here. So we're just speculating on what some of the zonation might be and what we see different in the various holes. And that was one thing we picked up on hole 4.
Yeah. I mean, I think, in general terms, what that question is getting at is that, as Bob said, these systems are zoned. You typically get more copper at depth, and then they tend to become increasingly precious metal rich as you go up. So far, we've largely been drilling in the copper rich part of the system, despite some of the the local bonanza grade gold hits. So, one of the things that we'll be looking for as we work our way up and laterally in the system is a more precious metal rich part of the system. And, maybe some of what we're seeing in drill hole 4, which kind of hit higher up in the same structure that we hit in hole 2, was, some indications that might be true. And as we work our way up in the system, we're going to get into a higher gold and silver zones.
And I think we may have answered this regarding the spin-offs.
Yeah.
And then financing, we covered that. From Connor, any potential permitting challenges associated with a much larger program for next year?
I mean, we're permitted for the drilling that we want to do. We're kind of working on a couple of things to do with getting more water supply and all of that, but nothing out of the ordinary so far.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the different copper, gold, silver zones, if there are differences in the elevation direction of the system?
I think we kind of answered that.
Cover that.
Tends to be more gold and silver upward in the system.
And I think we may have answered this one too regarding timing from assays from Los Helados.
Yeah, we're expecting those shortly in the next week or 10 days.
And then is there an equivalent to these high-grade veins in Filo?
Bob, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, there may be. But there are some pyrite and enargite veins at surface near Filo called the Marancelis veins, which has always been an exploration target that, Filo has just had a lot of other higher priority exploration targets to drill. But definitely it stands to reason that you're in a very similar system, same part of the world, same age, same overall structural regime, that these kinds of veins may also exist peripheral to Filo and to Los Helados for them.
Once upon a time, Cerro Blanco was thought to be the most promising target. Then you hit Los Helados. Curious if you will drill this target next season.
Well, some of the other questions are, kind of, I guess, hinting at how much we have on our plate. I think there's probably a little bit of a bandwidth limit to how much we can do. We don't have current plans to drill Cerro Blanco, but that's definitely another high potential target on our ground. We'll try to get to it. I'm not sure that we're going to be able to do that this coming season.
How do you see the structures? How do you see the structures hosting high grade, high sulfidation mineralization joining the regional north-south structure hosting the Filo Los Helados structure? Do you see the local structure trending far beyond the scale of drilling completed to date?
I mean, I think as we mentioned earlier, Filo, Lunahuasi, Los Helados all sit within the same north-northeast trending structural corridor that's a kilometer or a kilometer and a half wide. They're all kind of within that structural zone. We can see that, kind of at various different scales. We haven't spent a lot of time tracing that, where those might go outside of our land position. We've kind of focused on what's within the boundaries of our land position.
So how do you feel NGX now fits into the overall corporate objectives of the Lundin Group in the district?
Oof. I don't know. I mean, the Lundin Group is not a corporate entity, so I guess there aren't corporate objectives, because Lundin, I guess what makes us a Lundin company is that the Lundin family trusts are our largest investors. We run NGX for the benefit of NGX shareholders, not for any kind of larger entity. So I think our focus is going to stay on adding as much shareholder value as we can for NGX shareholders, and anything else that happens in the broader environment is not really in our control and not something that we spend a lot of time thinking about. We're focused on shareholder value for NGX.
Apologies there. How far away could a PFS be?
At Lunahuasi, quite a long way away. I mean, we've got 6 holes into the core zone. We're a long way away from a resource, let alone engineering studies. I mean, I would say those are 3 to 5 years away.
And just from a logistics standpoint, Wojtek, we did come up against a 1-hour mark. Are you okay continuing on? There's a handful of questions that remain, as you can see.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we can keep
Okay.
answering questions.
Just want to make sure you were good with that. Any concerns from a development standpoint about the proximity of Lunahuasi to glacial areas?
I mean, glaciers are an issue, and in this area, I think you can see from the photograph that we're not under any kind of glacier. I mean, I think in the immediate exploration area, we're not concerned.
So again, one of the advantages of a potential underground target here.
Yeah,
So
which would have even less impact.
And would this mineralization be amenable to processing through the Jose Maria plant flow sheet?
That would be an excellent question for the Lundin Mining guys. I don't know, and I guess we haven't done any metallurgical test work here, and I don't know the details of the Jose Maria plant flow sheet. It's certainly close to the Jose Maria plants. We're only 7 or 8 kilometers away. So I would think that's something they would probably look at some point.
And here's an interesting question, kind of around valuation. So congratulations on the good work. As a shareholder, having trouble understanding what I actually have, how to value Los Helados versus Lunahuasi. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we get that question a lot. I was on a road show, and I got that question a lot. I mean, the short answer is it's a hard question to answer, and I'd probably refer you to some of the analyst reports that are out on us, where people have Los Helados is a much more advanced project. There's a lot more data. There's past engineering studies, all that sort of thing. So I think people have been able to look at some of the development concepts around Los Helados, including potential synergies with Caserones, and various analysts have modeled out, what the value of Los Helados might be in that scenario. So I think there's reasonably good information out there on what the potential value of Los Helados is. I feel at this point, Los Helados probably accounts for a significant proportion of our value. I don't know exactly what that is, but it's a more advanced project that's been easier for people to wrap numbers around it. Lunahuasi is still earlier stage, and I think investors struggle to figure out exactly how to value that. But I think a good starting point would be to look at some of the analyst reports that have looked at the potential value of Los Helados, and then I guess whatever's left over is the value the market's currently attributing to Lunahuasi. But I would say that still Los Helados more than justifies, a significant proportion of our current market cap. So I would say that the market is still significantly undervaluing the potential that we see at Lunahuasi.
And just as a follow-up to that, I think in the previous call that we did, you may have mentioned this to me before, something to the effect of, the value of the company sort of pre-discovery hole at Lunahuasi was something, and that was all basically attributed to Los Helados. And so the incremental add-on since the discovery hole, is that a fair way to still look at it?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the most recent market data that we have. So I mean, one thing to do would be to look back at what the value of NGX was the day before the Lunahuasi announcement, and I mean, at that point, I think it'd be reasonable to expect that, all of the valuation was attributed to Los Helados, and then all of, a significant proportion of the value that's been added since then can be attributed to Lunahuasi. It's a bit of an art, not a science. I guess as an investor, I would take both approaches. I would look at some of those analyst reports that look at the the potential value of Los Helados, and then on the market side, you can look at what the value of NGX was before the Lunahuasi discovery for a proxy valuation of Los Helados.
Perfect. Can you talk about the company's current cash position?
Yeah, our most recent financial statements came out, Q1 financial statements, I think we had $11 million in cash. And that's the most recent financial information that's public.
Okay. And then have you sampled the outcroppings of these pillar-like silicified structures? Are these outcroppings well mineralized?
Yeah, not all of them, but some of them, yes. And we've gotten good rock chip samples out of some of those silicified ribs. That's why we're encouraged about the potential underneath them.
So this is next question is similar to something that I've often asked you in the past, but with all the great work you've done, can you talk a little bit about your level of excitement on these holes compared to earlier companies?
Ooh, great question, and I think both Bob and I should answer that separately. It's my excitement level is super high. I've been doing this. Well, Bob and I have been doing this for a similar amount of time. I have never drilled holes like this early, and I've been involved in several discoveries. I've never drilled holes like this early in a program. It's super exciting. I don't know, Bob.
Yeah, you get very few chances in a career to drill holes like hole number 2, and starting off in an area like that's never been drilled before. That's covered by talus. You don't have super strong surface indications or specific surface indications of mineralization. So when we were drilling that hole, you're talking to the geologists at site, and to get those kinds of results out of an initial early stage hole like that is the kind of thing that happens 3 or 4 times in a career.
Yeah, I'd say if you're lucky that happens. I would say if you're lucky that happens once in your career. I mean, we did not, these were holes 1 and 2 were initial scout holes, just kind of, the original idea was just to get a general sense for the system, and there wasn't a whole lot more that went into targeting those holes than let's drill one at the top and let's drill one at the bottom, kind of wherever we can get in relatively close to where we had some geochemistry. Like that was about it. There was not, geophysics or any other sophisticated targeting. And hole 2 was literally put, that hole was cited. The criteria for that was, that looks like some pretty good alteration. Let's get as close to the base of that as we can and put a hole into it. And to hit what we hit, with that sort of, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that kind of targeting, but to hit, what we did is remarkable. It just does not happen very often.
And I don't want to drift into the realms of superstition here, but the geologist who was on the rig when we drilled hole 2,
Yes.
Leticia Gonzalez, who's one of our key geologists down there, who a couple of years earlier was also the geologist on a hole for Philo, which was hole 41, which some of you might remember.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So yeah, that's actually an interesting coincidence, or maybe it's not a coincidence. Yeah, the same geologist was running the program at the time that the 2 key holes at Philo and at Lunahuasi were drilled.
But I think that hole 2 is in that realm of significance. That hole 41 was to Philo. It's a huge step change in the profile of the project. It immediately changes your perspective on what the project can be, what kind of mineralization you can discover there, what sort of system it is. It fundamentally changes everything about the project, how you value it, how you explore it, and what you think you can find there. So hole 2 is one of the most significant holes I've certainly drilled in my career.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, I'd like to just bring it back to scale here. So, what you see on this image, and I think it'll probably just highlight the stage that we're at. So, 90% of the drilling that we've done at Philo is within about 5 kilometer by 1 kilometer wide strip. So in that sort of area at Philo, we've got probably more than 200 holes. In exactly the same size area, right now we've got 8 holes, and you can see that they're kind of clustered in 2 places. So, the sort of scale and the sort of potential that you have here is, or the footprint here is similar to what we see at Philo, but we're at a fraction of the drilling density, and still I would argue a fraction of the valuation. So I think there's a lot of potential upside here, on something that we're really on the early stages of exploring.
A couple of questions remain, and one is the elevation difference between here and Philo.
Well, the drill holes 1 and 2 are on the same plateau that Philo sits on, so it's roughly the same at the top, and the other drill holes are 750 meters below that. So the top 2 holes are roughly the same elevation as Philo, and the bottom holes are 750 meters lower. Ooh, the last question is, I think, an excellent one to end on. Leticia, who is the geologist that was in charge of this project for us, she has a dog named Luna. Did that have anything to do with the name Lunahuasi? If you ask Leticia, she would say it has everything to do with naming the project. If you ask me, it was because of that super cool photo. I don't know. The truth is somewhere between the 2. It's a nice coincidence that Leticia's dog is named Luna.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I think that gets to all of our questions. Maybe I turn it back to you, Wojtak and Bob, for any closing thoughts.
Yeah, do you want to go first, Bob, and then maybe I can wrap it up?
Yeah, I guess it's just what's coming ahead of us. We've got 1 news release left for Los Helados. And all this, we talked about Los Helados. We certainly can't lose sight of it. It'll wrap up the results that we got this year. And, we did do a bunch of geophysics there in addition to the drilling, and came up with some pretty compelling targets. I think the holes that we drilled there with the discovery of Phoenix and Alicanto have also changed our perception of what Los Helados is and what's left to be discovered there. So we'll highlight some of those ideas in the upcoming news release, and probably expect more work at Los Helados next season as well. And then just, what we've tried to get across here, some of the main ideas that, Lunahuasi is fundamentally different than the other deposits we've discovered in this area. And I think in a good way. I think this could turn into something that's actually preferable to a large porphyry deposit. But we are still going to search for that. There's a lot left to come on both projects.
Yeah, I think the final thought, I would leave you with is, grade is king. Grade is really, really important. And this is by far the highest grade. These are by far the highest grade intercepts that we've drilled anywhere in the district. So to get those sorts of results this early is I think really significant. And, you know, I think we're both extremely, and our whole team is really excited to keep exploring this area. I think we're on the threshold of defining something quite remarkable here in a district that's already got, you know, a couple of quite remarkable deposits. So, you know, I think you'll be hearing a lot more about this area, a lot more about Lunahuasi, and you know, next season's program is going to be super exciting to follow, and hopefully many of you will be along with us for the ride.
Excellent. Well, Wojtak and Bob, I appreciate it. Congratulations on success to date, and look forward to continued development. With that, we are all set to conclude. Thanks everybody for joining us.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for attending, everyone.